And it just started the recording. Okay.
That's this cool. Girl getting the meeting.
And I first want to apologize. We invited Henry to come, but I didn't send him the link to the meeting until this morning. So we're glad to have you with us. And we understand now you have a second book, or at least a sequel to the first fiction that you've written. And you're going to tell us all about it. And you should be able to present slides, right, Dennis?
Yes.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here, Jim, and all of you. Always great to reconnect with CCPC folks. And you're right, this is my second attempt at fiction, the book Windows of the Heavens. It's a sequel to my first mystery novel, City of Peace, which I presented to you, I believe, in the summer of 2019. Which seems like a lifetime ago now. Yes. But this book was a pandemic project, and very happy that it made it into print and is now available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, basically all the different online retailers. And if you enjoy cozy mysteries, I hope you'll take advantage of the chance to buy this book and read it. I didn't even know what a cozy mystery was before I started writing, but it turns out I stumbled into this genre. And a cozy mystery basically is a mystery novel set in a small town or community, one that focuses primarily on the relationships between characters, and it does not have a lot of explicit sex or blood and guts. And when I mentioned that to an older member of my church, he said, "Darn it, I want my money back." But this is, it's a popular genre. A lot of people enjoy these cozy mysteries. And in this particular book, there is a murder, of course, it's a murder mystery, but the town also faces an environmental threat. This is different than my first book, where the threat to the town of Occoquan, the river town of Occoquan here in Northern Virginia, was a terrorist threat. You may recall that if you read the book City of Peace. In this case, the threat to Occoquan is an environmental threat. And having created this story, I've stumbled into another genre that I didn't know existed, but it's a class of books that are now being called cli-fi. Can you guess what that is?
Climate fiction.
Climate fiction. Climate fiction. I just read a long book in that genre called The Ministry for the Future. And if you're interested in climate fiction, I recommend that to you, The Ministry for the Future. But again, this was something I just kind of stumbled into and really enjoyed exploring this environmental issue through this book. And so without any further ado, I'll jump into a PowerPoint I have with some readings. I'll try not to introduce any spoilers if you have not read the book. I certainly want you to continue to be intrigued by how the story plays out, but I'll introduce some of the major characters and issues and themes with a PowerPoint and a few readings, and then we can have some time of conversation. If you do have questions along the way, feel free to just speak up, because once I'm doing the PowerPoint, it's kind of hard to see everybody's faces. So just jump in if something is confusing or perplexing, or if you just have a question along the way. So here we go. Let me get the slideshow going here. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So as I said, this is a novel titled Windows of the Heavens, sequel to City of Peace. And there were three inspirations for this book. First, the town of Occoquan, where Nancy and I live and have lived now for 6 years. The topic of faith and fitness, and the town of Occoquan, Honduras. I'm so glad Bill Freeborn is on the call. Bill and I have done a number of mission trips to Honduras, and he has visited along with me the ancient town of Occoquan. So the first inspiration, the town of Occoquan. It's a river town on the Occoquan River of about 1,000 residents. It's 30 minutes south of DC, famous for creating a huge bottleneck if you're trying to travel south on I-95. Perhaps you have cursed the Occoquan exit on some of your travels.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hearing some amens there. That is being rectified to some extent. They're adding another lane, so that will help for a while at least. The name Occoquan is an Indian name. It means at the end of the water. And so it fits our position on the Occoquan River. Although when I presented the first book to the mayor of Occoquan, he said that some studies had been done and linguists have determined that Occoquan actually means a grove of trees. But since the town has, at the end of the water on all of its letterheads, they're not going to change it at this point. They're staying with it. So there's a lot of history here in Occoquan. It is the home of the Dog Indians, lived here for many centuries. The colonists arrived in 1734. So we are getting close to celebrating our 300th anniversary of colonization here. And the town now is quite racially and culturally and religiously diverse. One of the church buildings in town was just converted into a mosque. And so we have Christians, Jews, Muslims, and even Wiccans. I'll say more about them in a minute. Second inspiration is faith and fitness. Here's a shot of me and some church members about to embark on a century bike ride, a 100-mile bike ride. And this is important to me because I have long believed it's really important to keep body and soul together. For me, that involves endurance exercise. And so I've done a marathon, a triathlon, or a century bike ride every year since the year 2000. Sounds like we have at least one runner on the call. Heard about that Whiskey Rebellion 10K. So for me, very important to try to keep body and soul together through both faith and fitness. One of the convictions I have that comes from deep within the Christian tradition is that there should be no separation between spirit and body. A lot of times we tend to separate the two. We think of the body as being very earthly, and some Christians see it as being somehow corrupted or less important to God than the spirit. But that is really not the focus of our Christian faith. Jesus himself enjoyed his body. He enjoyed the bodily pleasures of taste and touch, sitting down and eating with people. And so for Jesus, it was important to keep body and soul together. He himself, in our traditional Christian view, is that Jesus was God in human form. He was our creator, the supreme spirit in creation. And so for Christians, I believe it's important to find a way to keep body and spirit together, to not see the body as lesser than the spirit, to not see the body as somehow corrupt and the spirit as pure, but to find a way to hold them together. And you'll see if you enter into this book that that's an important theme of this novel. Well, the third inspiration is the town of Occoquan, Honduras. Occoquan is part of a region in southwestern Honduras. It's been the site of numerous mission trips that church members and I have taken, and Bill Freeborn, as I said, was a part of many of these for the first 10 years of our time in Honduras. Chuck Tanner has done a lot of mission work in Honduras, especially working on water purification projects. And for me, it's been an important opportunity to serve in the name of Jesus and to develop partnerships with our Christian partners in that country. And here in this picture, you see a picture of some of the beautiful young people that we've been able to engage in the course of our dozen or so mission trips we've taken. There's a lot of history in Occoquan. There is in the town of Occoquan Ruinas, a number of very impressive Mayan ruins. There is some beautiful stone artwork in this city, which is by the Occoquan River. And for archaeologists and others, there is a great mystery of why this civilization collapsed. It was a huge city at the height of its power, but it suddenly disappeared. And archaeologists and others have wondered why. And so this archaeological question becomes a question at the heart of my novel, Windows of the Heavens. Why did Occoquan collapse? So any questions about those inspirations before I get into the book itself? So the town of Occoquan, faith and fitness, Occoquan, Honduras, very important themes that are woven throughout this cozy mystery.
I'd comment the cause of most civilizations falling has been internal.
Well, and that certainly was one of the leading theories about the collapse of Occoquan.
Yep. Read Jared Diamond's book, Collapse.
Mm. Well, I won't answer the question because that's part of the mystery here. Well, let's jump into the book. I've got a reading for you, and I had mentioned before that there are Wiccans in Occoquan. Wicca is a nature-based religion. Those who practice it often call themselves witches, whether male or female. It's growing in popularity across our country, and it seeks both gods and goddesses in creation. So let me read to you a passage from the very beginning of the book. And this involves the main character of the book, Harley Camden, who is a Methodist minister sent by his bishop to the town of Occoquan to serve Riverside Methodist Church. And so I'll introduce you both to Harley and the town through this reading from the beginning of the book. Harley's story began on an evening walk through River Mill Park in the town of Occoquan, Virginia. The street lights that dotted the perimeter of the small park were not working on that September night, so the place was strangely dark, and its black-topped walking path vanished quickly in front of him, disappearing into the void. At the entrance of the park, he hesitated, feeling as though he were about to jump into a dark and mysterious lake, not knowing the depth of the water or what hazards lay beneath the surface. Fortunately, the moon was full on that Monday night, and the park was bathed in an unearthly glow. Once the streetlights of the town were behind him and his eyes had time to adjust, The moonlight gave him sufficient illumination to find his way. Stepping into the park and beginning his walk along the path, he saw that the moon made everything look like it had been painted in various shades of teal, which was an odd color for the placid Occoquan River to his right and the hulking oak trees to his left. But Harley began to enjoy this unusual filter on the familiar scenery, and he soon noticed that there were eerie moon shadows under the park's benches along the way. Then, as he was nearing the western end of the park, he saw another light, yellow flames dancing out of the top of a large steel drum. Dark silhouettes were moving in front of the flames, figures walking slowly in a circle. His heart beat faster, and Harley wondered if he should turn around and head home. Caution pulled him in one direction and curiosity in the other. And as he stopped and stood in place, he began to hear people chanting in a strange guttural language. The group was made up of about a dozen people dressed in loose, flowing clothing, and they seemed to be riveted on each other and on the flames at the center of their circle. Then his heart jumped as he realized what he was seeing: the witches of Occoquan. So that introduces Harley to a group that he didn't know much about at the beginning of the book, but that he becomes involved with in some unexpected ways. Any knowledge of Wicca in the group here? Is this a religious movement you've heard about or are familiar with in any way?
Very small knowledge.
Likewise, very small.
Well, keep your eyes open. You may be hearing more about Wicca in years to come. So the second reading, it tells the story of when the heavens opened on the town of Occoquan. This happened soon after Harley's sighting of the witches, when heavy rains fall on Occoquan. This particular picture is a real picture of a flood in Occoquan. And the building that you see in this picture is right next to where Nancy and I live. So we have dodged this bullet in our 6 years here, but I'm not counting on us avoiding this kind of problem forever. In the book, the streets flood in Occoquan, and a building is knocked down, a candle shop. And in the debris of this collapse, a corpse is found with a carving of Satan's claw. So let me read the story of the aftermath of the flood and deepen the mystery for you. In this particular reading, Harley is traveling through Occoquan with the town's maintenance man, a man named Tim Underwood, and they are inspecting the damage from the flood. Tim and Harley could see the Occoquan River rushing wildly from west to east, carrying a thick load of debris from upriver. The streets of the town were full of refuse as well, and coated with an inch of mud. "I've got my work cut out for me," said Tim, the maintenance man. "Cleaning the streets alone is going to take weeks." Riverside Methodist Church stood on the corner of Commerce and Washington Streets, as it had since its founding as Emmanuel Baptist in 1885. As soon as the church came into view, Harley gave a gasp. The cross that had perched on the top of the stubby steeple was missing. As Tim turned left on Washington and then right into the church parking lot, Harley craned his neck to see where it was, and then he spotted it on the ground near the front door of the church. It was surrounded by splinters of wood from the shattered steeple. Jumping out of the truck, Harley picked up the heavy iron cross, which was fortunately undamaged by its fall. Tim kicked the toe of one of his boots in the pieces of wood on the ground and said, "Looks like you had a thoroughly rotten steeple, Pastor. Lots of water damage over the years, I would guess." The two men gazed up at the stub of the white steeple, which looked like a broken tooth. "That's going to be tough to fix," said Harley. "Who even does that kind of work?" "It'll be a challenge," said Tim, "but a good carpenter should be able to do the job. I know a guy." "Never would have guessed I had steeple rot," Harley mused. "Wonder how deep it goes." "Won't know till someone gets up there and starts poking around," said Tim. "Steeple rot," said Harley with a grin. "Sounds like a medical term." "For sick pastors," teased Tim. At that moment, a siren began to wail, and one of Occoquan's 2 patrol cars roared down the street with its blue lights flashing. "Looks like Terry Stone," said Tim, watching as the car took a streaking left turn onto Mill Street. Stone was Occoquan's sheriff, who, along with Deputy Sharon Madison, could comprise the entire department. The two did a good job of traffic enforcement and inebriation control, but for any major criminal activity, they needed the help of the Prince William County Police. "Where do you think he's heading?" Harley asked. "Probably back to the candle shop," Tim guessed. "Throw the cross in the back of the truck and let's go see." In a matter of minutes, they were back at the corner of Mill and Ellicott Streets. The burly Prince William cop was still there, along with several other officers, paramedics, and firefighters. The atmosphere was highly charged, even though the danger of the hurricane was now long gone. Sheriff Terry Stone was talking with them, and one officer was pointing down to the edge of the water, which had receded several feet in the last hour. More of the wreckage of the collapsed candle shop was now visible, and several firefighters and officers were gathered around something in the debris. They walked carefully through the mud, trying to maintain good footing in the muck. And when they reached the water's edge, they saw what the officers and firefighters had discovered: a body. It appeared to be that of a young man in his early 20s, a Latino with numerous tattoos and long dark hair. His face was battered and swollen, and his right arm was twisted in an impossible angle over his head. Numerous lacerations covered his naked torso, and several fingers were missing from his left hand. Harley had seen many corpses over the course of his ministry, but none this disfigured, and he suddenly felt himself overcome by nausea. Not wanting to embarrass himself by vomiting, he turned away from the body and faced Mill Street. But then he heard the burly cop say to Sheriff Stone, "Look, the claw." Harley swallowed hard and turned back toward the body. Carved into the man's back was a crude and bloody rendering of Satan's claws. So the mystery deepens, with people wondering what has caused this flood and who killed this man, this 20-something Latino whose body is found in the wreckage of this collapsed candle shop. Harley then takes a trip out of the country. He travels to Honduras on a mission trip and is in the Occoquan district in the town of La Entrada. And in La Entrada, he is with a group from his church on a dental brigade. The head of the brigade is a dentist named Bill Stanford. And Bill becomes very concerned because Harley has begun to behave very erratically on the trip. This comes soon after the flood, soon after his encounter with the witches, soon after the discovery of the body in the debris. And one day he leaves the group, Harley leaves the group on a kind of a spiritual quest. And I'll share a reading with you about what happens when Harley goes on this quest. In the town of La Entrada, where the mission trip is going on, the town is staying in a hotel and they're having dinner together. And at dinner one night, the dentist, Bill Stanford, asks Harley, Harley, would you like to share your plans with the rest of us? No, Harley said, taking a bite of toast. You all do what you need to do, and I'll do what I need to do. Bill nodded and said, okay. He was concerned about Harley, but he was also kind of relieved that Harley wouldn't be causing problems for the clinic operation. Bill said, you do you thing, Harley, and we'll see you back here at the hotel for dinner. Well, that was the plan, but it didn't work out that way. Harley left the hotel at the same time as the rest of them, but he didn't return in the evening. He wasn't back by sunset, and by 10 o'clock, Bill Stanford and another mission trip participant, Gretchen, were becoming deeply concerned. They talked with the hotel desk clerk about whether he had received any messages from Harley. The answer was no. And whether the Honduran police could handle a missing persons investigation. And the answer was not very well. Then, as they were feeling panic begin to set in, a phone at the desk rang. A priest from the Catholic Church in the town of Occoquan Ruinas had Harley there with him at his rectory, and the priest wasn't sure what to do with him. The desk clerk had limited ability to translate Spanish into English, so Gretchen fetched another participant in the trip, Juan Irazzo, to tell them what the priest was saying. This man, Harley Camden, showed up at our church this evening after spending the morning at the Mayan ruins. He prayed in our church until we closed at 8 o'clock, and then he asked if he could pray all night. We said no and asked what he was doing there. He said that he had been in the archaeological park, praying for an end to human suffering, for the coming of God's new heaven and new earth, for the arrival of the new Jerusalem. Bill and Gretchen shook their heads as Juan provided this translation, wondering what had possessed Harley to go on this bizarre quest. He was hungry, so we fed him, said the priest. Now, what do you want us to do with him? Juan said that they really wanted to get Harley back to La Entrada, but he wouldn't be able to drive the van to Occoquan Ruinas until the morning. The priest offered to keep him in the rectory, give him breakfast the next day, and allow him to pray in the church until Juan arrived. Thank you, said Juan, while Bill and Gretchen shared their appreciation as well. Just one more question, Father. How did Harley get to you? He hitchhiked, said the priest, over 60 kilometers. I don't know how he did it, but he did. He's a man on a mission. Indeed he is, said Bill to Gretchen, just not the mission that the rest of us are on. So the mystery deepens with Harley descending into this very erratic behavior, this kind of madness, this spiritual quest. And you're left to wonder, what is going on here? A psychological break, some kind of a spiritual crisis, a curse from the Wiccans of Occoquan, who knows? So I'll read one final reading to you in which Harley is now back in Occoquan, trying to get his body and spirit back together. and he goes on a walk from his home across a pedestrian bridge over the Occoquan River into the woods that are along the shoreline on the northern bank of the Occoquan River. And along the road through the woods are these enormous rocks. This is a place that Harley goes to try to get his own body and spirit back together. He remembers from his own past how therapeutic it's been to walk, to run, to exercise. And so he does that through these woods. And he begins to find peace next to these 300 million year old rocks. And so I'll share with you a brief reading, and then we can open up the floor for some discussion. Harley continued his walk by crossing the pedestrian bridge and strolling up the road which ran along the river on the northern bank. The sun had set, but there was still enough light to illuminate the charcoal gray outcroppings of rock that rose up from the edge of the river and undergirded the road along the ridge. Harley knew that the rocks were old, formed about 300 million years ago, in the era in which the North American and African land masses slowly plowed into each other and created a supercontinent called Pangaea. When the supercontinent began to separate into the continents that we know today, it left behind the shelves of rock that stand on either side of the Occoquan River. These ancient formations have been around forever, thought Harley. Putting his hands on a rock by the roadside, one with a flat top around 3 feet high and 6 feet wide, he knew that he was making a connection with something much bigger than himself. Sitting down on the rock, he had the strange sensation that his center of gravity was moving out of his head. It moved down, 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 past his shoulders and chest and waist, and deep into the stone beneath him. What, he wondered, had this massive rock witnessed as it looked over the town of Occoquan? Native Americans and settlers, revolutionary soldiers and redcoats, slave owners and abolitionists, blacks and whites, and now an odd collection of witches and Jews and Christians and Muslims. The rocks had seen it all, standing silently above the fading light on the Occoquan River. Pulling out his smartphone, Harley called up a psalm, number 18. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge. Harley read it and then repeated it. Get outside your head, he thought to himself. Let yourself rest. Rest in the Lord of the rock. This is what is really real, he realized. A fortress that can stand strong against any assault. Lean on this, rely on this, the rock in which you can take refuge. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer. Harley repeated it to himself over and over and over again. So, what questions do you have as I've introduced some of these themes? Questions about the town of Occoquan, faith and fitness, Copan, Honduras, Wicca, God and creation, Harley Camden, or Henry Brinton? So
I have a comment.
Yes, indeed.
I read the book. I enjoyed it very much. And my three comments. First of all, I really enjoyed your development of the characters again in this book. I enjoyed the mystery. And I also noticed the fact that there was a hook at the end of the book, that there's going to be another one.
I have started work on the third.
Right. Anyway, I enjoyed the book very much.
Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate that.
Well, Henry, I have a question. I've seen interviews with several authors, and one of the questions that's always asked, and I'll ask you, do you get the inspiration for these stories kind of of whole cloth, or does it develop as you write it?
That's a great question, Jim. You know, I'm not as experienced as some authors with the writing of fiction, but I can tell you that for these two, City of Peace and Windows of the Heavens, I've had a sense of what the story arc needs to be, where I want to go, and what kind of interactions there will be between characters, what the major critical points will be. You know, in this case, the murder of this Latino man, the flood threatening the town of Occoquan, Harley Camden's descent into a psychological and spiritual crisis. But then once I get into writing the story, what really drives it is the interaction between the characters, what they say to each other, what they do to each other. And what happens is that the characters begin to take over. And the things that I think they're going to say and do don't necessarily align with what they end up saying and doing. So they take on a bit of a life of their own, and I have to respect them. They become real people in my imagination. And so they sometimes take me in different directions. And so if you read the book, you will be reading some things that I thought would happen and some things that I discovered had to happen as the story unfolded. That's part of the fun of the book. That's part of the creative process and why I enjoy this kind of writing, because it can't be mapped out, it can't be forced, or it just doesn't seem real. And more than anything else, I want it to be real. Now, to be sure, you're going to find some things in this book are kind of incredible because they are from the perspective of Harley Camden in a fit of madness. But even there, I want it to be believable. I want you to understand that a person could have this kind of struggle and desperately want to emerge from it.
Thanks.
Henry, you had introduced the religion of Wicca. I did a quick research on that. It's European based, but apparently it's growing in this country. And it has what I characterize as both good and bad aspects to it. It puts importance on feminism and on nature and on gender equality, but then it's based on magic, ritual, neo-pagan, witchcraft.
Exactly right. You've got it, Thad. And I think it's that blend of qualities that makes it intriguing to people and why I felt I needed to wrestle with it in this book. I've got clergy friends who say, I don't even want to think about witches. They are 100% evil. If you think about them, talk about them, write about them, you are introducing darkness into your life. And my attitude is that these people all around us, and they are being drawn to Wicca for good reasons. I want to ask the question, why is this attractive to people? And it's for a lot of the reasons you've just laid out there, Thad. The elevation of women, feminist spirituality, respect for nature. Now, I'm not going to tell you where I end up in this book and Harley Camden's interaction with the witches of Occoquan. That would give it away. I mean, I'll say to you now that, I am a committed follower of Jesus Christ, and I see fullness of truth in Jesus. And I see Jesus as the key to our relationship with nature. God loved nature so much that God entered human life in the form of a human being, Jesus Christ. He is our creator in creation. So for me, that's how you answer that question. But other people are turning to Wicca because they're not finding that in Christianity. They find, they read news reports, and they hear about some Christians saying, we should exploit creation. Creation is for us to use. God's going to take us all to heaven anyway. So, why not burn fossil fuels? There are Christians who say that. But to me, that's not true to the God who honors creation by sending Jesus into it. So these are important issues to wrestle with. And for me, the introduction of Wiccans is an important way of entering into dialogue with those who are trying to find a way to keep body and spirit together, those who are trying to find a way to be in relationship with God's creation.
I have a question to ask you, which is totally different than what you've been talking about just at the moment. A few years back, I was at a Barnes and Noble evening with David Baldacci, who lives in the area where I'm around the Richmond area or Charlottesville or whatever. And I made the comment, I said, your books are really, really complex and all the ins and outs that are there. And I said, do you sit down and put together a detailed outline as you're going around and starting to write? And he said, absolutely not. He said, I come up with a basic idea and then I go charging off. And he said, but that's totally different than John Grisham, who the two of them were on a panel and somebody asked the same question. And his answer was, yes, I put together a very detailed outline before I get things going. And two totally different approaches. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the Baldacci camp there. And sometimes it gets me in trouble. I'll go dashing off in one direction and then have to go back and change something at the beginning because it doesn't all fit together. But someone like Grisham, who would have a super detailed outline, would never end up in a place he didn't intend to go. So I like the creative process of letting it play out, but then sometimes there has to be some revisions later on.
I really miss he would come to Barnes and Nobles fairly often in Richmond area or in Glen Allen where I live. But since the pandemic has come, he hasn't showed up, and there haven't been any other authors showing up. But I found those sessions with these famous authors to be most interesting. He was Baldacci was such an easygoing guy to talk to.
That is great. Well, I also had some of those opportunities for in-person book talks and book signings when City of Peace came out. And I haven't done any of those with Windows of the Heavens because it's just not safe. And people are still so reluctant to come out, understandably. Wouldn't be much fun to go sit in an empty bookstore. But what the pandemic has done is opened up these possibilities for online Zoom book talks. So I'm enjoying being with you all this morning. And I've done a lot of these, both for City of Peace, and now I'm starting with Windows of the Heavens. And in some ways they're better because they enable us to connect from our homes, from wherever we are. There's no travel involved. People from across the country can join, Bill Freeborn, and that's just great. So something is lost with the inability to gather in person, but something is gained as well by this Zoom technology. So I'm actually going to focus on these kinds of gatherings with this new book because they are just so much easier to schedule and can involve people from such a wider range of locations.
Henry, as you develop your characters, do you loosely base them on people you've encountered in your life at all?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Paul. I try to be very careful not to base any character on any one person, because Occoquan is just a town of 1,000 people. And if I, outed somebody or embarrassed them in some way, that would really be bad for me and for them and for all of our neighbors. I must say the mayor of Occoquan said he wants to be in the book. He's mentioned in this book, but he wants to be a character in a future book, and he wants to be tall and really handsome.
Just like the rest of us.
He's put that request in, but no, I would say there are some composites in here. Harley Camden, the protagonist, is based a lot on me and on my perspective on life and some of the questions I have, some of the things I struggle with. I had to make him a Methodist because he needed to have a bishop to send him to Occoquan. If he were Presbyterian, it would have taken 5 chapters just to get him in his position. So I gave him a bishop in the first book just to send him to Occoquan against his will. But his theology is very much my own. His focus on faith and fitness, his desire to keep body and soul together, his time in his time in Honduras, all of that's based on real experiences. But no, I try to make composites of people. We do have a maintenance man here in Occoquan who's a bit of a character, but I base his actual physical description in the book on someone else in town who's even more of a character, who's from an old Occoquan family and knows a lot of the history of the town. So that's kind of the way to put people together. We do have a postmistress here who knows everybody's business. Here in Occoquan, we do not have residential mail delivery. There's no letter carriers bringing us our mail. We are each assigned a post office box, and so we go to the post office to get our mail each day. It's kind of a throwback to rural life in America in another time. But that means we all come to the post office, we see each other, we see the postmistress, and a lot of chatting happens, a lot of gossip is shared, and you see that in the book as well. So I'm inspired by the people I know, by relationships I've had, but I do not desire to embarrass anybody. And I also don't want anyone to be seen as a one-dimensional character. I want the readers to have sympathy for every single character in the book. Even if they turn out being a villain, I want the reader to think, this is a person who I understand. This is a person who's making decisions based on the world as they see it, and a world that makes sense to them. I'm not interested in one-dimensional characters. I want everyone to have some depth, and everyone to be seen in their own way as a person made in the image and likeness of God.
Anyway,
One
let
thing-
me comment a little bit. If you haven't visited Henry's hometown, it's a great little tourist place to go. So you can spend a day wandering the streets. And when I get there, I sit in the window and watch the tourists go by his window. Sometimes they come and knock on your house. I don't know. Sometimes they try to invade your territory a little bit, but it's a wonderful place, Occoquan. Actually, Norm and I and Henry's children had experienced it before he moved there a long time ago. We used to take our grandchildren, Henry's Sam and Sarah, to Occoquan. So it's a beautiful place. Then the other thing, you spoke, privileged to be back in the Paper Tigers on this Zoom thing, obviously I thank Steve Webb for that. He kind of got me back with you guys, and been wonderful. The Zoom calls have been wonderful. One more thing, been watching Henry's services, and he brought one piece of that 300 million old rock into the children's sermon. I said, how did he get a hold of that rock? But I don't, you can tell how you had it in your hand. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, erosion happens, and I showed you the picture of one of those rock outcroppings along the road on the northern side of the Occoquan River. And you know, after a winter of freezing and thawing, little pieces chip off. And so one day I was walking along, and you know, a really nice chunk about this big was there by the roadside. So I picked it up, and I have it on my desk at work. It's a good reminder to me of my place in the universe. I can just look at that and think about its history and realize that the problems I'm facing in February of 2022 are not the most important thing that's ever happened in the history of the universe. And it gives me some perspective, which is what Harley Camden is starting to gain in that last reading I just shared with you, that reading on the Lord as his rock. So yeah, we're in touch with a lot here in Occoquan, and of course you are, you know, in Bowie and elsewhere. If you just look around and pay attention, you can learn a lot from the natural world around you and from the history of your particular place. And that is something that I've so enjoyed living in this town. The river's been flowing here for you know, many thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. And I know that there was a time when Occoquan was actually at the top of a mountain range as high as the Himalayas. That's not the way it is now, but that just gives me a perspective of on what my place is in this universe, and it can help with dealing with some of the stresses of the day that I'm living right now.
I have a comment and a question. Bill Freeborn, when he talks, it's just like he's right next door to me here. He comes across just as nice as anybody else. So Zoom really does work very well.
Yeah, believe me, it feels good.
Henry, where you live is in the historic part of Occoquan.
That's right.
What street are you on? Mill Street?
We're on Mill Street, 223 Mill Street.
Okay, what's nearby you for I'm looking at the detailed map. Are you close to the post office?
Right across the street from it.
No, I know exactly where you are. I can see exactly where you are.
Google Street View. We live in a Victorian townhouse on the corner of Mill Street and Gaslight Landing Court. The town, as I said earlier, was founded in 1734. It's been through a lot, Revolutionary War, Civil War. During the Civil War, it was an abolitionist stronghold. I get into that in the previous book, City of Peace. So the people of Occoquan were big supporters of Abraham Lincoln, and that made them very unpopular with their neighbors elsewhere here in Prince William County, Virginia. And so there's been a lot of conflict in this town, a lot of changes. Where we live looks old, but it's actually a development that was built in 2008, but within the Victorian style. And we have a row of 10 townhouses on the water, 10 townhouses on the street. Nancy and I live in one of the street side townhouses. So I really enjoy it.
You're very close to Mammy Davis Park?
Yes, yes.
When did the Occoquan go from being a creek to a river? When I was stationed at Quantico, it was Occoquan Creek.
You know, that's a great question. Those waters are connected, and where the creek becomes the river, I'm not exactly sure. There's lots of creeks that flow into the Occoquan River. And west of us, there's a dam. And so that has created the Occoquan Reservoir. which is a place where a lot of high school crew teams will do their rowing. It's also where a lot of people will put in boats, mostly small boats, fishing boats, sailboats, that sort of thing, small sailboats, sunfish and such. So we are downriver from that. We are east of the dam. And so the river flows from us out into the Potomac River. And then, of course, as you know, head down the Potomac, you get to Quantico. So Nancy and I have a power boat that we have here at Gaslight Landing here on the Occoquan River. And we can go out and enjoy the Potomac River south towards Quantico, north towards Mount Vernon and DC.
You can go to baseball games.
We can take the boat to Nats Park. There's a marina there. You can pay for a transient slip and tie up and go to a game, which is great fun.
I have a two-part question. First of all, will the sequel to the sequel be based in Occoquan? And second, you say that Harley is based at least in part on yourself. Is Harley handsome?
Not so much. He's not as tall and handsome as the mayor wants to be. No, I try to make him, pretty average. But he does share my passion for running. He tries to get out and run and stay in shape. Takes a little run along the river that I enjoy taking as often as he can. But yes, he will return in the third book. And I'm really intrigued by the Civil War history of this area. And so that will be a big part of the third book, the Civil War history. And I'm particularly interested in a family of Quakers who lived here. I mentioned the abolitionist movement, very strong here in town because of the presence of several Quaker families. And actually they have a Maryland connection as well. The family are the Ellicotts, and you all know about Ellicott City. So same family. Some settled here in Occoquan, some settled up in Ellicott City. And as I understand it, I haven't completed my research, but my understanding is they were all millers. So Ellicott City had some mills. Occoquan had a mill. I live on Mill Street. So that's a history I really want to dig into.
I have a question about the book, Henry.
Yes.
My question is, as we look at how mainline churches are continuing to lose members continuously, pretty much, did the thought of taking a little quick look at the Wiccans and not their nudity and that sort of thing, but some of their feelings and why it might appeal to people occur to you when you were, composing your book? I find it very interesting to look at some of the things the Wiccans do, and reminds me sometimes that they're not quite as mechanically oriented as we Christians can be sometimes.
Absolutely, Bob. Whether I explored that to everyone's satisfaction remains to be seen. But absolutely, I think that, at the heart of this book is a question of, what people are looking for these days. And I think a lot of them are looking for a spirituality that is embodied, that takes the human body seriously, care for the body, care for other people, care for their bodies, trying to keep body and spirit together. That's what the Wiccans are trying to do. I'm not agreeing with the way they do it, but the attraction is real. People are looking for a nature-based spirituality. I think we all have the experience of going out and, feeling God in the glory of creation. And we don't always emphasize that as much as we should. Our spirituality tends to focus on Bible study and on indoor worship. And there are a lot of people who want to take their spirituality out into the world. So yes, that is a set of spiritual questions that I try to engage in this book. It's not it's a mystery novel. It's not a theological treatise. But since I'm a pastor, since I'm a Christian, I ask these questions every day, and I try to weave them into this story in a way that makes sense, that is real, and honors the integrity of the characters. Well, I hope for those of you who buy the book and read it, I hope it's a good read for you. I hope that you just enjoy it, because that's, I think, the best way to teach. Jesus knew that. Jesus didn't go out into the countryside and say to people, let's open your scroll and let's read the scroll together. Jesus told stories. He told parables. The kingdom of God is like a sower sowing seed. And that intrigued people. They leaned into that. They wanted to know, what's he talking about? What's the message about God in this? And so that's really my agenda, to tell a good story and to get people asking these questions along with me. So if you want to buy it, it's available. It's available paperback. It's available hardback. It's available on a Kindle. And that's how I like to read most my books these days. And so if you're a Kindle fan, you can get it on Kindle. And that's, of course, the most economical way to buy a book. So all those platforms are available to you.
I surely enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bob.
I read your first one on my Nook, and I thought it was great. And I intend to do this one as well. I assume it's on Nook as well.
I think it is. I do. I don't understand the publishing industry.
Well, it's a Barnes and Noble thing, and you said it was on Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, it's on Barnes and Noble. I think the publisher just sends out an ebook, and then each bookseller formats it the way they want. So Amazon does Kindle, Barnes and Noble does Nook. So yeah, I think you should be able to find it there without any problem.
Found the last one, so.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Somebody else has read the book in our household. I have not. So Norma has read it, and then I'll read it after I wanted to get her reaction. Then I'll obviously be reading it very soon.
All right.
Henry, I got a quick question for you, Henry.
Sure. Yeah, Chuck. Mr. Honduras man.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons that people enjoy your books so much is that the wonderful word pictures you paint with the descriptions that you put in them. And I'm just wondering, when I think about that, the way you have to paint these pictures, have you ever been intrigued by the thought of doing some poetry?
Thank you, Chuck. I have done a little bit over the years. I think I'd be embarrassed to share it with anybody at this point. But thank you for that encouragement. I'm not afraid of trying new things. And I find that, venturing out in these creative directions is really very satisfying. It really feeds my spirit. So I appreciate that. Let me see where the spirit leads me on that.
Okay, wonderful.
I have another question. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've taken a little bit of interest in the area where I grew up there, and I've rode the streetcars back when they had them there. Interesting to see pictures of those. But the church that I was baptized in, that my parents attended when we were living there, was the Miller Park Presbyterian Church. And it was a beautiful building, and there's pictures of it on the internet. But the one picture that's shown there has where normally it still has the name Miller Park Presbyterian Church on it, but it says it's the World Fellowship Christian Center. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I'm not
World
familiar
Fellowship.
with that.
You're not familiar with it? That's what it's called now.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a denomination or just the name of an independent Christian group.
I don't know.
It is a reminder of how church buildings get repurposed over the years. And the church building here in Occoquan, which is a real building, was in fact established as an African-American Baptist church in the 1880s, founded by a formerly enslaved man named Bailey. And when I came to Occoquan, it had become a Pentecostal church. In my book, of course, I have it turned into Riverside Methodist Church for my own purposes. But 3 weeks ago, the renovations were completed in its most recent incarnation, and it is now a mosque. A group of Muslims in the area have made it the Muslim Peace Center. And I've had a chance to get to know some of the participants there, and they're lovely people. And it's just another sign of the dynamism of religious life in the United States and how things are always changing. From Miller Park Presbyterian to this congregation in your hometown, and here in Occoquan, Baptist to Pentecostal to Muslim. We struggle, I think, sometimes to keep up with these changes, but they're going to happen, like it or not.
Jim Bridger will relate to this. We were in Amsterdam and we'd signed up for a tour of the red light district. And in the process of walking from where we were staying to the red light district, we walked by a beautiful church that was Christian. It had been converted to a mosque. And the reason given is that the Christian church could no longer support the building, and rather than let it rot away, the Muslims took it over and made it into a mosque.
Kind of like what happened in Istanbul with Hagia Sophia, that glorious
Yes.
church, one of the wonders of the world, and it became a mosque at one point, and then a museum. Some talk of it switching back to a mosque, but we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, talking
Speaking of
about
churches.
talking about the fact that some people are enamored with the spirituality of nature. I remember a couple, 3 years ago, we were on a tour of national parks of the Southwest of the United States. And we went to Bryce and stood on the edge of it, looking out over all of the hundreds and thousands of hoodoos. And we could naturally see the result of why the Native Americans would think this was a spiritual place. And in fact, the tourists lowered their voices and almost whispered to each other. It seemed like that was the thing that you ought to do in that place.
So true. Thank you, Jim.
Henry just got a call from your mother. Bee's
Oh,
talking
really?
with her right now.
Small world. Small world.
Henry, did you see the article that was on the web this last week about a young boy in Utah, an 8-year-old boy who wrote an 80-page story? His parents didn't even know about it. It was illustrated, and then he took it to the library and stuck it on the shelf without them knowing what was happening. And it turns out that within a few months, the librarian treated it as a real book.
I
And within
love
a
it.
few months, there was a list of 50 people who wanted to check it out.
Oh, I love it.
It's a wonderful story.
That is what they call self-publishing in its purest form.
He's already started a second book.
I love it. Well, I must say, as an author, I love to sell books, and, thank you to all who buy them. But what really delights me is seeing my book on a library shelf. And just the thought of people coming into the library and pulling it off the shelf, checking it out, entering my world by their reading, and then putting it back for someone else to enjoy, that just thrills me. I'll never be a John Grisham or a David Baldacci selling, tens of thousands of books, but I just delight in the thought that there is someone out there right now reading my book and entering the world of my imagination and maybe caring about something that I really care about, because there's a lot of my heart in this book and everything I try to write. And so it's a form of connection that really delights me.
A lot of us have the same thoughts, but no talent. That's me.
You're kind to suggest I have talent. Jury's out on that, but I'm glad I can write these stories and share them. If you do have a response, let me just say I would be so honored and pleased if you would write a review on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, on Goodreads, any of these internet platforms. It can just be a single line, really just, interesting story, love the nature spirituality, or whatever comes into your head. It doesn't have to be a newspaper length review, but that really is gratifying and helpful. What I understand from the internet world is the more reviews you get, not necessarily the quality of the reviews, but the more reviews you get, the more the word about the book spreads. And so it's a great way to help me and to introduce the book to others as well. So that would be my my humble request.
You're going to have to pick up the pace to catch up with John Grisham, but I'm sure you will in the end. But I'd like to ask you how your church is doing in the pandemic.
Wow, great question. We have struggled like all churches. That year when we were completely online, March of 2020 through March of 2021 was brutal. We did pivot, to online worship and Christian education and other activities, but the separation has really taken a toll, and we are struggling to get back together, to return, to rebuild. We started coming back together in person last Easter, and things were going well, taking our masks off in the summer, and then they had to all go back on in the fall with Delta and then Omicron. We have continued to gather, but we reverted to social distancing and, of course, mask enforcement. We didn't sing for most of the month of January, but we're getting back to that now. So it's been raggedy. It's been really raggedy. And it's been hard. Also, I think people are suffering from the isolation. It's hurting people. They're feeling very cut off from each other. The online connections just don't do the trick. They don't sustain people's spirits. It goes back to what I'm saying in the book about the importance of body and spirit. We need to be embodied with each other. We need to bring our bodies into these relationships. When people talk online, they tend to be really mean to each other, very critical. We had to shut our Facebook page down for a while because people were just being nasty. It's hard. It's really hard. So maybe that's more than you wanted to know, but that's my confessional to you right there.
Thank you.
We're still alive though. Still going. Some churches have shut down, so thank God we're still alive. But go right ahead.
A little while back, when things were looking better, we were talking about getting back together as a group in person, and we didn't really take a vote, but it seemed like there was a consensus that we should just keep on Zooming.
You're talking about paper tigers?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I think Zoom is a lot better than other platforms because I feel you can make a connection. I feel connected to all of you this morning. This is good. But it has its limitations, and I don't know what you've been using, as your online platform for worship, but I found that there's really nothing like being together for a service of worship.
Well, one of the neat things about Zoom, of course, is that we have Dick Barlow, and we have Bill Freeborn, we have Paul Sell on here, who otherwise wouldn't be able to join us.
I agree with that.
Exactly right, and I do one of our adult Christian formation classes in a hybrid style. So I gather about 10 people in a classroom, and we have a big TV, and then there's probably another 8 or 10 that join that way. And some of them could not be with us because they're out of the area. So for that reason, as you've said, it's really great. And one of our other classes, like your Paper Tigers, has chosen to remain online only. They have some participants who are overseas, former members in Germany. And so for them, it's absolutely critical to be on Zoom. So everybody's going to, make the choice that's right for them. And there's no one right way to do it. But I think many churches have suffered by this inability to gather in person. And so I'm pushing towards gathering whenever and wherever we can.
Yeah, real quickly, I do a current events group at our senior center here, which is only a block away from us. So I've been doing Zoom the last couple of times, but then we're deciding, can we get back to the hybrid situation you're just describing? Some of us could be there physically next Thursday, and some will be on Zoom, the hybrid version of things.
Well, I find as a pastor, I used to walk through the church, with a Bible under my arm. Now it's a Bible under one arm and a laptop computer under the other arm. Wherever I go, it seems I got to be ready to set up and bring people in online. So stuff they never taught me in seminary.
It's hard for us to imagine how difficult it is to be an elementary school teacher now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Not after having Jack here since before Christmas until Martin Luther King weekend doing kindergarten online. The poor guy by the end of the day was putting his head in his hand and going, "Can we turn this off now?" I mean, it was sad.
Yeah.
We
I
human beings,
bet you're glad you're retired from the school system.
Yeah, I still keep in touch with some of my friends. I mentored a group from across the country until last June, even though the program ended in November, because they were just struggling with so much stuff, all in their early careers as superintendents, from Oregon to Illinois to Wisconsin and Ohio. And although the Ohio guy dropped, but yeah, there's just a lot going on with folks out there, and I've been happy to be able to be helpful to some of them.
Well, thank you for helping, because they need all the support and guidance they can get. So Kevin, I'm sure you're buddies with my neighbor, Dan Dominich.
Oh yeah, I know Dan. Yeah, I'm sort of, since I finished the mentoring thing with AASA, I haven't really done much. I know they're meeting in person in Nashville for their conference this month, but I hear that I don't know, somebody was in Nashville not long ago and they said there is no coronavirus. There's not a mask to be seen anywhere.
Oh
There's
my
no
gosh.
anything. And I'm like, so I'm not going with a 5-year-old and 4 other grandsons in my life pretty regularly. I'm not taking those kind of chances. So we'll see if anything comes up with them down the road. But I'm almost done with the national organizations because I'm not really active anymore.
Right. Well, Dan's a good friend, lives right here in our condo community, and his boat is right next to mine. So we spent a lot of time together.
Well, tell him I said hello.
I will. I sure will. If he survives Nashville.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, I think probably at the conference they're going to require it, but there's nowhere else that people are wearing them, is what I'm told.
we human beings are social animals.
Henry.
And think it's important that we have a lot of get-togethers in person. The Zoom works nice, but I think there's a place for the other also. The other thing we've had over the years, there's been lack of civility, decency. It's turned to nastiness, and I think this virus has only helped to aggravate that even more.
I agree 100%.
Just for your information, Chuck set up what you're calling a hybrid setup in our old meeting place so that we could have both in person and people join us from home.
Good.
Keep that in mind for the future.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I find it can work pretty well. Get a big screen TV in the room and, make it so that the people around the table can be seen on camera, and it works just fine. Good, it's a good option for people who cannot physically be present.
And that way we get food back into the business.
So who
Amen.
makes that decision here in this group?
We all do.
Oh, okay.
It was a democracy.
Well, if you have a vote, I promise I will not ever ask for a recount.
But the rest of us will.
We have a
Troublemakers.
democracy as long as we can keep it.
Yeah.
There you go.
But if you don't like the results, you'll say it's rigged, right?
We read a book on democracy, Henry, if you're wondering what this is all about.
I get a good sense of what you're talking about.
Well, let me, on behalf of the group, thank you for joining us, Henry.
Thank
Sounds
you.
like got a
Thank
really
you
good-
so much, Henry.
Oh, thanks,
What a-
Henry.
What a pleasure. Really great to see you all and terrific conversation. Perhaps I'll be able to join you again for one of your books, not my book. I'll keep an eye on what you're reading.
In that respect, the link I sent you is the link we've been using
Good.
since we started Zooming, thanks to Dennis. And anytime you want to join us, you can jump right in.
Thank you so much. I hope I'll be able to do that. Wednesday's my day off, so it's often a day when there's lots of honeydews. But it's a good time for me, 9 o'clock. So maybe I can jump in at some point in the future.
That'd be great.
Bye all.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, Henry.
Thanks, Henry.
Next week, we start the book on American health, the history of American health. It will take 3 weeks to do it, and see you then.
Okay.
Oh,
All right,
Dennis,
guys.
can you send the copy of the recording to Henry? You need
Steve.
his email address?
No, I'll send him a link, I guess. I don't know if I have his address, but I'm gonna post it with the adult ed classes on the website.
Okay. See you next week.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Bye all.
Bye.